Okay, let's bring it back here into the spin room. No spin here. This is all the facts, all the time. Politico, organization you know pretty well, put it this way. The highest stakes hate watch of any modern presidential campaign. If folks texting me is any indication, there's some truth to that. But what's it going to take tonight to break through to the double haters, the undecideds, the disgusted?
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. Poll after poll shows Americans are not very happy with this choice. And that is part of why the Biden campaign's thinking was to have an early debate, was to sort of reinforce to Americans, like it or not, this is your choice. It's A versus B. And it's the president's job to say, look, I need to remind you of what 4 years of Donald Trump was about, and another 4 years would be that much worse. But yes, there are going to be people watching tonight. There'll be certainly some Democrats who have fallen out of love with Joe Biden. He's going to try to win them back. There is a thin sliver of undecideds, people who have not formed impressions yet, as hard as that is to believe, of either of these two men. And that actually points to the challenge of tonight, why it is so high stakes. This race has been so static. It has largely stayed the same. Trump with consistent but narrow leads in most battleground states, although a little momentum for Biden of late. For the Biden team, it's an effort to try to reach into Americans' living rooms and say, look, this is what's at stake here. So it's not just high stakes for the campaign, but they're trying to say high stakes for the future of the country.
Not only do voters not like either of these guys for the most part, they really don't like each other. And if you go back 4 years, that was the last time, October 2020, in another debate, that they actually were in the same room. That tradition of the outgoing president welcoming the incoming president, even if you're the incumbent, happened before. It happened with Jimmy Carter. It happened with George H.W. Bush. They welcomed the guy who beat them to the White House. There you see the pictures there. That did not happen. Donald Trump did not go to the inauguration. Well, against that backdrop, what are we going to see tonight?
Yeah, there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of hate on stage. There's hate in the crowd. What'd you say in the intro? Aged animosity. I think we're all kind of relating to that. You know, President Obama was there also, we should add, when Donald Trump won. And Hillary Clinton showed up to Donald Trump's inauguration. George Bush showed up to Donald Trump's inauguration after he had trashed them. So there is a category difference here. You know, not only did Trump try to overthrow the government, but after he failed at that, you know, then he petulantly left. And I think that underscores the animosity on stage tonight, but also is an attack line opportunity for Joe Biden, right? You don't care about democracy. You attacked our democracy. You don't care about police. You say you do. The Capitol Police that were there that day, some died, some were attacked. You've never called them. And by the way, you're also a sore loser, and nobody likes a sore loser. So I think that, you know, that if Joe Biden can effectively take the legitimate reasons why there's animosity and turn them into an attack line, I think that could be useful for him, because as we talk about the hate and the haters, when you hear from these double haters in our focus groups at the Bulwark, like, they do hate is right for Donald Trump. Joe Biden, they're just kind of like, they're not sure he's up for it, right? Yeah. So if Joe Biden can remind them why they hate Donald Trump and demonstrate to them that he's up for it, I think he could gain tonight.
There's also the issues, right, and news of day. So, Simone, I want to ask you about the other big story, the Supreme Court decision on abortion. The justices allowing emergency abortions to continue to be performed, but only for now, after dismissing the state's challenge to the federal law. The Biden campaign's already hammering away on this issue, releasing a new ad. I want to play just a little part of it.
I was right around 11 weeks when I had a miscarriage. The pain that I was feeling was excruciating. I was turned away from 2 emergency rooms. That was a direct result of Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade.
Simone, how does Joe Biden effectively lean into that issue tonight?
Talking about the people's stories and describing what it means for women. I think if on the debate stage tonight, when the issue of abortion comes up, because it will come up, if it is only talked about in these very bureaucratic terms, that's not what's going to speak to the people who are watching at home. When you are prepping a candidate for the debate, any debate, but especially a presidential level debate, the biggest thing, and this was when I was in President Biden's debates back when he was candidate Biden in 2019, 2020, this is what we hammered home. Find your opportunities to turn to the camera, cut through the noise of the opponent standing next to you and look directly into the camera and speak to the American people. And I think this particular issue is going to be one of those. You know, that decision in Idaho, Chris, you know very well, before the Supreme Court's ruling, in Idaho, women were not able to get an abortion if they needed one, if they showed up in the emergency room if they were pregnant, if it were to save their life. They weren't going to get one or save their health. They weren't able to get one. Now, that is something that the president has to speak to on that debate stage. And Donald Trump, I mean, I'd be interested to say if he thinks abortion is health care, right? Where is Donald Trump going to come down on that? And that could also be a moment for Joe Biden, again, to take it directly to the American people and transcend past the cameras and Jake and Dana, who will be in the room with Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Well, it's interesting because you reported today, Jonathan, that there is a plan for Joe Biden to try to get under Donald Trump's skin. And I'm wondering, do you do it with abortion, calling him on all the flip-flops and taking credit multiple times, including recently, for the overturning of Roe v. Wade? Do you go after him for not winning 2020? How does he get under his skin?
It's all of the above and then some. I think we're going to see a pretty aggressive President Biden tonight on a couple of issues. Abortion, for sure. We've noticed Vice President Harris using Trump abortion bans as the phrase. I think we'll hear that from President Biden this evening. He's going to talk about defending democracy at home and abroad, saying that Trump siding with Putin, but also siding with the rioters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And I think we'll hear him talk about the 2020 election and potentially even directly ask him, if the moderators don't beat him to it, hey, who won in 2020? Which also will not only point him out as a loser, but will likely have Trump then repeat the big lie to a national television audience. So there's this chatter from the Trump campaign that he's going to come in more disciplined tonight. He's going to be calmer. We've seen him do that for small bursts in the past, but the thought is from the president and his team is try to knock him off that, provoke the real Donald Trump, the Donald Trump we see every day at a rally, and that sort of more chaotic Donald Trump they think will not play well with the viewers who are still going back and forth between the two candidates.
For all the campaigns all of us have all been a part of, we've never been here at a debate this early by months. Strategically, having it this early, the mic cut, nobody in the audience. Does it favor one or the other?
I think the early side of it favors Biden for the reason that Jonathan pointed out. I think it was important for the Biden campaign to clarify that this is a two-person race. We mentioned earlier that the voters...
But have the voters gotten that message?
I think they're hoping that tonight is the way to get them that message, because Biden is really struggling, even with people in the Democratic coalition, with folks who are not paying attention. So I think he's hoping this will focus the mind a little bit. I got to say, I think the mic cut thing probably helps Trump a bit, and I'm unsure who was pushing for that or which campaign was pushing for that. But it benefits Biden if Trump seems like a crazy person. Biden's best moment in the 2020 debate, was when he snapped back at Trump for continuing to interrupt him. And so I don't know why they would help, keep Trump in a cage. So I do think that marginally helps Trump tonight.
I was looking at the Wall Street Journal, Jonathan. Joe Biden, according to them, has been in more than 30 presidential level debates in his lifetime. He's run a few times. Trump has engaged in roughly half that many. You normally look at that and say, oh, more experience, better off. Is there any such thing as experience when it comes to debating Donald Trump making a difference?
I mean, maybe. Biden has done it twice before and came out, by most estimates, ahead in both. I mean, I think two things are at play here. First of all, this is, much like the State of the Union, a moment where Biden can take on the doubts that he's not up for the job. He's too old, he's too feeble. And if he has a strong performance, and people around him certainly believe that he will, like he did in the State of the Union, he'll be able to sort of quiet some of that chatter, at least for the time being. And I think that the other thing that's in play tonight, often the incumbent president really struggles in a first debate. Yeah. Famously, Barack Obama did in 2012 against Mitt Romney, because they're the president. They're not used to being challenged, and because they didn't have to go through a primary process, they're rusty. And that certainly may be true.
And they also have a day job.
They have a day job. They're busy. And that may be true for Biden as well, even though he's had a week of debate prep here. But it's also true for Trump. Usually the challenger is come off of the primaries. That person is sharp. That person is ready to go. Trump skipped all the Republican primaries, and he hasn't sat for a contentious interview in years.
The Corey Lewandowski interview on Newsmax wasn't too contentious this
Didn't
week?
Qualify, including the Chiron that said Newsmax believes the 2020 election was settled fairly.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.